Okay, so our next speaker, Sue Lennox. Sue is a social entrepreneur, the co-founder and co-CEO of Oz Green. To Sue, Oz Green is not a job. It is her strategic response to her deep concern for the earth and her vision to build a more sustainable, peaceful and equitable world. She's been a social activist for over 40 years, a journey she shares with her husband, Colin. She is a grandmother, an avid gardener, and lives a simple life off the grid. So without further ado, please join me in welcoming Sue Lennox.
Good morning, everyone. It's just fantastic to be here. You know, I love gardening. And what I love about gardening is, you know, seeing seeds just grow and blossom and bear fruit. And the thing that I remind myself every time I'm out in the garden is I'm not actually making that seed. That seed creates its uniqueness. You know, it's there embedded in it, that brilliance, that uniqueness, that specialness of that seed. And I guess that's what my work is about. So, what is the future? I'm just going to, go back here, that's all right. I'll flip onto that one. So what I want to talk to you about is 4 things. What is a future that's worth sharing? What are the wicked challenges that we face? A little bit of my own story. And then particularly focusing on our big initiative, Youth Leading the World. So let's start by talking about what a future that's worth sharing from my worldview. And it's a future where we have found a way of living in harmony so that there's a fair share for current generations. And we're mindful of every single action so that we are living in a way that there is a fair share for future generations. And we're also living so that we understand that we rely on the incredible web of life for every breath, every drop of water, every morsel of food. And so we're living so that we're in harmony with all of the biosphere as well. For the young people involved in Youth Leading the World this year, this is their vision of what a future that's worth sharing is. From Bellingen, a harmonious community of dynamic, sustainable and connected people, creating a beautiful place for generations to come. So what are the wicked challenges that we face? We live probably in the most remarkable of times, the most precarious of times in the whole history of life on Earth. We're in this situation where now, if you add up the impact of everyone living on the world, we are at 1.5 planets. We have gone beyond the biosphere's capacity to carry us. And clearly, that has to change. But hand in hand with that, we have this crazy economic system that assumes that we can have infinite growth on a finite planet. And if everyone lived like we do in Australia, we'd actually need 4 planets. So we, ourselves, have got some big changes ahead. But when we look at the global scene and we talk about share, currently 1% of the world's people hold 40% of the world's wealth, and 50% of the world's people have 1% of the wealth. We will not have peace on Earth until we change this. And the International Energy Agency said to us at the end of last year, we've got to leave the fossil fuel in the ground. If we use more than 1/3, we are going to create a climate catastrophe because we will not keep global temperatures under the 2 degrees that is universally held, as that will give us about a 50-50 chance of avoiding climate chaos. For the young people in Bellingen involved in Youth Leading the World this year, this is what they saw as the most significant challenges, the wicked challenges from their worldview: coal seam gas and mining, poverty, climate change, ignorance and extinction. This is some research that's been done by the Lowy Institute, and it's tracking what the Australian community thinks about climate change. And I just want to follow the black line which is the proportion of the Australian community that sees that climate change is serious and requires urgent and substantive action. And you'll see that it's dropped from 70% in 2006 to a low point of under 40% in 2012. But it's tipped. Can you see it's turning? Now it's interesting, if you know anything about social innovation diffusion theory, that theory is that 40% of people is made up of the leaders, the social innovators and early adopters, and this group of what we call the early majority. And what we know from the diffusion of social innovation is that you get a critical mass at around 40%. So I think it's pretty amazing for us to think that despite all the insanity and lies that we have been peddled over the last 6 years, that in Australia, that proportion, 40% of our community has held the belief, the understanding of the urgency and severity of these times, and that is a cause for incredible hope. So a little bit about my own story. As a high school teacher, I've been concerned really for 40 years about the level of despair in young people. And so much of my work is focused on how we enable young people to discover their passion and get involved as social change activists and be part of creating the world they would like to see. In the late 80s, I was working at Freshwater High School in Sydney on the Northern Beaches, and there was a massive fish kill in our local lagoon. And I said to the young people, my Year 9 class, how do we change our community so that that can never happen again? And what I watched was that group of young people coming up with very smart, strategic ideas. They decided they needed to go out and personally interview the 1,500 businesses in Brookvale industrial area. They decided they wanted to make a video about how you can look after the earth, and they decided they needed to start learning about water quality and water quality testing because they had no way to engage with authority because they didn't understand water quality science. What's significant is we didn't know how to do any of that stuff when we began. And what I watched is that group of young people change their community. And we realised that young people are very powerful educators and motivators of adults. That work got a UN Media Peace Prize and a few other really cool things, and people started to look at what we were doing at the school. One of the groups that came to visit us was associated with the Clean Ganges campaign in India, and they said, will you come and help? And so in January 92, Col and I headed over to India, having never travelled outside Australia before, and that experience absolutely changed my life, because I realised what an incredibly insulated and privileged life I had lived to that point. And that the pollution and poverty in that place is something that I had never experienced. That's a full colour image of the River Ganges. But more importantly, I was seeing young people go down and drink directly from the river. And because we'd measured the pollution levels and we knew that they were hundreds of thousands times above what anyone should be touching, let alone drinking, I realised that what we'd begun in Australia probably had a much wider application. And so during that year, Colin and I struggled, and we decided that we'd actually leave our work as teachers and move our young family in with his mum and set up Oz Green, working out of her garage. And the purpose for Oz Green is about learning and leadership, for sustainability, for social innovation, and for community-driven change. And over the last 20 years, we've worked with hundreds of thousands of people right across the world and right across Australia. And the thing for me that is really exciting, whether I'm talking about villages in East Timor, or young people in Pakistan, or Indigenous communities in Australia, or heads of corporations in Australia, we do the same work. And that work is about focusing on what the challenges are, making sure that we know the ground that we're standing on. We keep very current with the science. And how does that affect us? How do we feel about it? And then taking those challenges and flipping it and going, what's the world we actually want to create? And how are we going to do that? How will we bring about change? And most importantly, what can I see myself doing? And then getting stuck into that. And the thing that we have found to be really, really important is enabling particularly young people to find a way to tackle the issues that trouble them. And when we're talking about Indigenous Australians, they're big challenges. But to give those young people a tool set that actually lets them find their own answers has been an incredible job. So about 6 years ago, we developed this concept of vibrant goals that really encapsulates what we're about. You know, you feel so strong and so good about this that you can rant about it. They have such a good vibe that you can rant about it. But when we look at the global community, we're in some really tough times. How do we take what we've learned and do it at scale? And about the same time, we actually moved up to Bellingen and brought Oz Green HQ with us. And a vision came to me of building a network of global change makers. And we realised that we needed to develop a new model, one that was low carbon, one that enabled us to do things at a much lower cost, and one that enabled us to grow our impact. So we designed a new way of working that involves us training local people to run our work, our initiative, in their own region. It kicks off with a 3-day program, highly participatory, that enables young people to become informed about what's going on, develop their own vision for change and what they're going to do to bring about change, and connect them up locally, nationally and globally with other change makers. The quality of facilitators has been amazing. Age range 14 to 70. And I have to say 3 TEDx speakers today are Youth Leading the World facilitators. We've developed an online training program where we do it real-time live with a virtual classroom, but directly involving that group of people with the people that are physically in the room during the training. And what's been incredibly exciting is that when we look at the impact of those that have done the online training versus those that are physically present, there's no difference. So we understand that this is something we can really grow. It's all about partnership with local communities, and we've seen the initiative grow from the 7 locations that we began with in 2009 to 70 this year. And we're now asking ourselves, what does it take to do 700? And as I mentioned, we've trained 400 facilitators. So what are some of these young people doing? Here's a bunch of young guys in Sydney, and each of them sitting down during Youth Leading the World, and they're saying, I'm the only person in my school that gives a damn about climate change. Yeah, that's what it's like for me. I'm the only person in my school that gives a damn about climate change. And I said to them, if you are feeling something, you can be sure that there are thousands of others like you. So when we're in this space of social innovation, that's the golden opportunity. So these guys decided to set up a Facebook page and invite their friends to be part of it. And that night there were 20. Within a month there were 650 members, and they'd established the Sydney Youth Climate Action Network that now has thousands of participants and schools involved, not only in Sydney but also in Melbourne and Brisbane. Completely youth-driven, and they get themselves out to local community events and say, how big is your footprint? As well as doing a whole lot of other stuff. But there's the key that I think we face right now. If it concerns us, that's the point of social innovation. We can guarantee there are thousands of others like it, and that's where we can work for change. Other young people have gone on to influence their families to reduce their footprints from that 4 planets down to 1 planet. Or they've influenced their school community and enrolled them to go on and get their school to become completely solar. Or they've decided that it's too difficult to influence politicians, I'll become one. And Vanessa is one of the youngest elected members that we know of, but certainly in Warringah she's the youngest elected member. So here we are, the team in Bellingen this year. What did they decide to do? I have to say that I was astounded by their brilliance and their strategy. The young people involved in Youth Leading the World here with us in Bellingen they've decided they want to organise a youth eco-festival. That involves street art, that involves a junk rally, that involves saying, bring your own containers. Be conscious of every choice you make. Make sure you're on 100% green power. And if you're interested in connecting with them, we're having a meeting at the Youth Hub on the 15th of November, and we want every youth and environment organisation to get involved in this big thing that will happen in Youth Week, April next year. So in closing, it's all about possibilities. And there are three things that I say at the end of any program. The first one is, if you're alive and active, make sure you're getting enough sleep. Because we need to sustain ourselves so we can be really effective in these times. The second one is that every thought, every action counts. Be conscious of every choice you are making. Either you are contributing to those wicked challenges, or you are contributing to building the future that we want to be part of. And the third one is about Bellingen. So much of what I do is about building the sense that change is possible, and it's possible to change fast. Bellingen is a most remarkable community, and we have the capacity with what we do to show the world what is possible. And I'm very glad to be here with you. Thank you.